There is an incredible power in building a deep connection as a leader. The secret to building a deep connection lies in authenticity and vulnerability. In today's episode, I'm joined by author Tony Martignetti. Tony shares with us hard truths about what holds us back from sharing our true selves at work and the great benefits that lie just the other side of stepping out of our comfort zones and being authentic as a leader. This interview is full of golden tips for all of us. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project. I'm greatly honoured today to be joined by Tony Martignetti. Tony is the host of a podcast called the Virtual Campfire, which is about leadership and campfire discussions with leaders. And he's a thought leader in leadership. He's an advisor, he's a coach, and he's the author of two books, Climbing the Right Mountain and Campfire Lessons for Leaders. And today, one of his areas of expertise is about developing a deep connection as a leader. And that's what we're going to unpack. And I think this virtual campfire, the campfire lessons, the campfire sessions, that sounds like a deep connection to me. So I think that's where our nose is going to lead us today. So let's see how we go. Tony, without any further ado, I'd love it if you would say hello to the audience. I'd love to know a little bit about your background and what inspired you into this world of leadership today.
Wonderful. First of all, thank you so much for welcoming me into this session. I feel, like we're going to have a great conversation today. So I'm thrilled to explore. So a little background on me is, I spent most of my career working in the biotech industry, in the high tech and biotech industry. 25 years of working in that industry, and it was really an amazing place to be. I learned a lot. But what was interesting is I played a role of being a finance and strategy professional, and it wasn't really who I am. It was something that I thought I was. I kind of followed this path that was laid out for me based on what people thought would be good for me. Like, you should go and do this. It's like the old saying, if you remember the Graduate, plastics, Benjamin, follow plastics. The path was that this would be a great lucrative plan, but in reality, I think my heart was always someplace else. But I was successful. And so I continued. And until I got to the point where, I had done a lot of work, but I was feeling the sense of something's missing. Something was not really quite right. And so I got to, the place where I said to myself, maybe it's time for me to think about what is real for me, what I really want, what I want to experience. And the calling came in a moment of really realizing that it was time for me to shift and do the work of connecting with people on a deeper level. And I decided to leave a biotech boardroom and literally walk out of the room and say, I'm going to leave the room to change the room. And that's what was my calling, to become a leadership development professional and coach. It wasn't something that was naturally happening just out of the blue. I mean, it just kind of happened from this place of being frustrated by the way leaders were showing up and realizing I had to do something different. And so first I panicked, then I started making plans. And that's really what led me into this path.
Well done. Well done on the transition. A very familiar story, I have to say. I'm going to share three things I picked up on there. First of all, I love this, leave the room to fix the room. That's brilliant. The language that you used, I was playing the role of. You didn't say I was a finance professional, I was this or whatever. You said I was playing the role of. Today, the role of finance professional is played by Tony Martignetti. It sounds like you're going to be performing in a method acting or whatever, and you're immersing yourself in a world, but it's not really you.
Yeah.
And then
I wish it felt like play.
Yeah.
But it wasn't.
It's a little more serious than that. But then the other thing you said is because you were very good at it, like you would have been driving success, you would have been I'm going to say well paid, it would have
Mhm.
been pretty hard to turn your back on what was lucrative.
Yes. Yes. And that's what a lot of people struggle with is this, how do you leave something that's good to go to something else, right? Um, Oftentimes that's the hardest thing. If you're leaving something that's painful, like if you put your finger on a hot stove and you say, "Oh, that's hot," of course you're going to take your finger off. But if you are, holding on to something that's really good and pleasant, leaving that is hard, to go to something that's unknown. Now, I'm not saying that my experience in that world was all good. It was just that I was successful. I had some creature comforts that I was, used to, but I knew there was something missing, and I had to kind of throw a lot of things away, to please that one thing that needed to be taken care of, which is my sense of identity and my sense of meaning and fulfillment, which is really important. And I think a lot of us struggle with that, is the sense of like, oh, am I okay with getting uncomfortable?
Mm.
I question that. And I'll just, I don't want to go too far on this, but people often say like, oh, I'm fine with being uncomfortable. But when it comes down to it, do we really want to get uncomfortable?
Mm. Well, great things happen just the other side of our comfort zone, but it's not comfortable. That's
Mm.
the very definition. It's not comfortable, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's worth it, right? So,
Yeah.
curious question about the frustration, and there may not be a black and white answer to this, Tony. Were you frustrated with what was there, or were you frustrated with what was missing? So, in other words, was it a yearning to go, this is
Yeah.
not fulfilling, or were you getting frustrated in the, oh, I really can't do this job anymore? You with me? It's kind of,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great, you pull it, it's a great question. And I think that's something that is, it was leading up to that moment that had me feeling the sense of, okay, something's missing, but I can deal with it. But then you start to see a lot of the chinks in the kinks in the armor. That's the right word. But this idea that like, wow, wait a minute, I'm starting to see things with different eyes. I'm
mm,
starting to see things from the perspective of maybe things aren't as good as I thought they were. And I was holding on to something that I thought was precious, meaning an industry that was one of, caring for patients, having a good purpose, and ultimately, there were some things about that industry that I wasn't really seeing because I was seeing them through a rosy colored glasses. And so that started to kind of wear down. And that moment when I left was because I started to see most clearly that no, I'm done like trying to fit in here. It's time for me to
mm.
step out.
So I'm picking up two things, Tony. One is
Please.
incongruence with who you are. So it didn't feel like this is not me anymore. And a
Mm.
realization it's not me. It may not have been you ever. A realization that this is not me. And second, the identification of a problem that you saw needed to be addressed in the world. Tell me more about the
Yes.
problem. What problems were you seeing
Yeah.
in leadership?
Yeah, the problem I was seeing with leadership is the ability to, well, I should say ability, this thing where some leaders were putting up faces, putting up a mask, holding back their own insecurities and their ability to show their true selves by, showing a strong face or trying to protect their image with a mask. And I think ultimately that's what was showing up in a lot of the rooms that I was going into and seeing some of those leaders who were acting tough or trying to prove themselves because they felt like they had to.
Mm,
They couldn't show what they really felt or what was really real for them, or that they might not know all the answers. And so, with those masks that are showing up, it gets really tiring after a while. When you have to continue to be something you're not or show up in a way that isn't you really, you eventually get fatigued by putting on that mask. And in many ways, that's what I was doing. Is that I was trying to be something that I was not. I was putting on a mask of being someone who's very strong analytically and had to think like a numbers person. But in reality, I was an artist at heart, and that's who I really am. And I think that was who was dying to get out. And when I did, I felt a lot lighter, a lot freer, a lot more congruent, as you say, with the person who I am.
I love
Hope
it.
that didn't. Yeah.
I love it, Tony. So this metaphor of the mask is beautiful. Now, what I'm hearing, so you were finding yourself incongruent. Now I'm hearing you observe other leaders that today the role of leader is played by, and someone is playing a role. They're not showing up as their authentic self. And I heard two elements of that role. One was almost a challenge to the identity that they'd built themselves up. So almost challenging the story that they've told themselves in the head about themselves. There's something else there around, did they have an understanding of what a leader should be, or were they just mimicking the behavior of people they've seen before them, right? So, I need to be angry today because I'm the leader and I should be angry at this, rather than, no, I just need to be myself. I just need to be myself.
Yeah.
So how much do you think this kind of the role modeling of those that come before us, the expectations that we put on ourselves going, a leader should be like this, instead of just being, no, you are the leader, be yourself?
Yeah. I just love how you got into this. And it really, if you, let's kind of paint the picture of where we're at right now is there's, looking at the workplace as theater, right? If we're making this into a theatrical production, and if that's what we are doing, we're creating a scene and all of that, then that's really not going to serve anyone because it's all fake. What we need real. We need, to bring in the people who are feeling like this is the person I am, not the role I'm playing. And ultimately, I feel like that's what was crumbling down in those moments that I was experiencing, is that there was too much inauthenticity in that room. Sorry. And I was starting to see that through all of that, we needed to get real, and we needed to get connected with each other in a way that truly broke down all of those barriers. I think part of it comes from not just from a place of, oh, I want to be inefficient, I want to be someone else, or I need to be this certain way. It also comes from a pattern we get stuck into. Once you have this ideal of what you think a leader should look like, then you work your way into that, and then you play that role for so long that you get into that pattern of being that person.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then it starts becoming exhausting because you're not yourself anymore. You're second guessing yourself 2 moves in advance. You're going, oh, if I'm the leader, I should be doing this. And the thing that really triggered me when you were talking about this, when you're talking about knowing all the answers, and if they've convinced themselves in their head that a leader should know all the answers, well, all of a sudden they're going to start pretending they have all the answers when they don't. And if they just took the time to step back and realize, but their team might have the answers, they don't have to have all the answers, they could actually give themselves the license to let go a little bit, let go of that identity and be a real human being. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's such amazing truth of that. We hire people to work on our teams, very qualified people. But then what happens is a lot of these leaders who take the reins and say, okay, well, they're qualified, but they don't give them the opportunity to actually step up and do the work that they're meant for.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. All right, now let's transition. We've already used the word a few times around this word connection. Let's transition to that now. The first thing I'm going to say to you, very hard to build an authentic connection if people aren't showing up as authentic, right? Otherwise, you're going to have, this actor is connecting with this actor, but is it real? So what does a deep connection look like, Tony?
Yeah. And, again, it comes down to this. Before I talk about what a deep connection looks like, I think you're hitting on the right point, is the sense that a lot of places put a lot of theater around connection. They say, oh, we're going to have a connection conversation, or we're going to connect people, or, our team is so connected. But the reality is it's only at the level of the superficial, where they're just asking people, hey, how are you doing? That kind of thing. And it's really not getting to the deeper meaning of what it is that it means to be connected with an intentional sense. And so when I talk about deep connection, it's really getting to know first and foremost, starting with each person understanding themselves, giving people the space and the opportunity to explore, who is it that I am, that I bring to work and to my life in general. And that starts with an exploration. And I think oftentimes we have to say, what am I comfortable bringing to other people through conversations? And so I help people think about that through the context of really three C's. Connection is one of them. It's a big part of it, but curiosity and compassion. So when you connect with yourself, that means giving yourself the space to say, I'm in conversation with myself, and I want to be curious about who I really am. Ask myself about my journey. What is it that what were the moments that made me who I am? And then compassion about the things that, maybe you're scared to share because they were dark moments, or there are moments that you're embarrassed about. But what are the things that have made you who you are? And then once you start to get clear about your stories, about who it is you are, your hobbies, your interests, your backstory, then you start to open the circle and point it towards other people, and be curious and compassionate and connective to other people. And that allows us to get deeper into a dialogue with other people, that allows us to see, what makes them who they are, not just their title. I mean, I often talk about, when we have conversations with people in a networking event, the first thing we're doing is trying to impress them. We talk about titles. We talk about, where they work and all that kind of stuff. But if we could just slow things down and say, hey, tell me why, what brings you here? Like, what's exciting about this event? Or tell me, where you're from, and that kind of stuff, instead of getting into the titles from the get-go.
This is really powerful, Tony, and something I hadn't thought of, like really starting with self. Yeah. That if we want to build a deep connection with someone else, and we want someone to share their real self, we better be ready to reveal our real self. So then using your three words around connection, connecting to yourself, being curious about yourself. Who am I? Who am I really? And then having the compassion around that. Now, I think the compassion was the key word for me, and let me explain why.
Yeah,
if we don't have self-compassion, we're going to start judging ourselves before we share. And if we've prejudged ourselves, we're going to make an assumption that if I share this foible about myself, the real me, with another human being, they're going to judge me because I'm already judging me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then once we get through this, we've been through the curiosity, we've been the compassion, then we can be the one that starts. We can be the one that is ready to share something open that could be vulnerable, could be, well, not sure what Tony's going to think if I share with him that I'm this person.
Yeah.
But then that's going to open the license for the other person to reciprocate, and then you can flip the C's on the other way. You can connect, you can get curious about them, and you can be compassionate about who they are as their real human that they are. How does that sit with you?
100%. I mean, you're right on. You've really hit the right tone here. And this is exactly what we often miss, is because we feel like we can't bring those things into the workplace and talk about some of these things, because we feel as though we've got to be on guard. We've got to protect ourselves in the workplace, especially because there's, are people out who have the trust with the people. Well, first of all, this is how you build trust, is by, being willing to go and share these elements. And it's especially more powerful when when the leader is the one who's modeling the way, right? Because I've had people tell me like, well, that's all great, but what if there's, their senior management is not on board with this? Well, okay. If the senior management's not on board, start with your team, the people who you're in direct contact with, and create a ripple where you are. Start where you are and do what you can from whatever vantage point you have. Ultimately, if you can get the most senior people on the team on board, then what's going to happen is they'll see the value of having that connection and seeing how when people start to build stronger bonds, what kind of impact that'll have on the organization overall.
What role do you think safety plays here? Right. So if I've done that work and I've connected to myself, I've been curious about myself, I've gotten past the compassion part, and I've just accepted who I am and stopped prejudging myself. How safe do I need to feel before I go, you know what, team? Ugh.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's like another avenue along the safety path. It's about creating safety, because when people know you, when they get to know you on a personal level, then they feel safer. It actually opens the door for safety. And I guess the starting point of all of this is not really the starting point, but along this side is that we got to make sure that as you're opening up, the people around you, if they're not coming back and reciprocating, then you know that you're in an unsafe environment, or people aren't willing to trust. And so then you have to be able to say, okay, well, wait a minute, maybe this is not the place for me. People aren't willing to go along with, my thought of what I'd like to see, the sharing look like. And that's a red flag. If you can't even have a conversation where people are willing to get to know you or wanting to get to know you, then that means that there's no sense of safety. There's no sense of building trust. And that would mean that no matter what you do, you're always going to be on high alert. And that's not a good environment to be in.
All right. So we're going to test the waters, and if it's really not for us, we need to maybe make some different decisions there. Let's take a step back for a second. I think we've skipped over something, which is why. Why do you think this deep compassion and sharing the authentic self is important?
Well, first and foremost, we spend a lot of time in the workplace, right? Whether it be on virtual or in person. And, why should we spend part of our lives holding back who we are? It's exhausting. And it's also, to be honest with you, it's not the right way to live, for us to hold back who we are. Why not express ourselves? And people lose out by you not sharing yourself. You're not the only one who loses. They do too. And I'll give you an example. I'll use an example of some of the people who I've worked with who have shared their little things that they wanted to share with other people that have really opened the aperture for, communication and connection. And then before I do share that, I'll also share that when people are well connected and they have a deep connection, you unlock a whole new level of innovation and progress as an organization, which is a bottom line indicator. You want to look at that bottom line of what's going to drive the organization. If you have people who are feeling like they're connected, that's going to drive the needle for the organization. So let's come back just for a moment to just explore what it looks like to share. So I had a data scientist who I worked with for a number of years. She was amazing, really smart, deeply introspective, kind of an introvert. But one of the things that she shared with me was that she was a violinist, and she plays the violin all the time whenever she's not at work. And she got really good. In fact, she played at a lot of concerts. And so I said to her, I'm like, that's amazing. Like, what a cool thing. Have you ever thought about sharing that with people at work? And she said, no, I wouldn't do that. I'd be embarrassed, first of all. And second of all, who cares? Why would they care? And I said, well, what if you did? Like, what if you just, shared that with them, during one of the share sessions, just help, have them understand a bit more about you, because it sounds like you hold back a lot of that. And she did. She brought that into a conversation with a few people, and they were like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Can we come to one of your concerts? And before you know it, the whole company came and rallied around her and saw that they wanted to be at her concerts. They wanted to celebrate her, and they kind of saw her in full, and she felt more seen than ever. And she came out of her shell. She actually started to share more in meetings, and it just gave her a new lease in the way that she showed up in the room. And so that's what it did for her. And it also had this like uplift on other people around her who started to share their hobbies and interests and a little bit about their background. And it just changed the environment. So one person being brave enough to share that changed the dynamics of an entire team.
Oh, I
It's
love it,
amazing.
Tony. Yeah, absolutely love it. And it needs to start somewhere. That's beautiful. And I love how you're connecting this to diversity of thought and
Yeah.
safety and inclusion, that the person can then share all kinds of things. So they've gotten through, I'm going to call it a hurdle. It may have been a mental block for her in one of two ways. It sounds like for her, she was like, oh, who cares? No one's going to care. Part of her brain may have, we're psychoanalyzing someone I don't know. Part of her brain may have also feared judgment. What will they think of me if they know that I do this? Right. So the fear of judgment, or the fear of no one cares. This is a really important part of me. What if I share it and no one cares? There's multiple fears in there, or a vacuum. It's one of those. But once she got over that first hurdle of, oh, no one thought differently of me. In fact, the opposite. They thought more of me because I shared this, and now they know something about me. That means at the next meeting, I can safely speak up and say, you know what, boss, I don't think I agree with this course of action. I think we're missing something here.
Yes. Yeah. And that's exactly what we need more of, people sharing what's real for them. But it starts with that one brave moment of sharing a piece of them that they don't share. And it gives them the license, almost the agency that they need to be able to share, widely, eventually.
I I think you've covered two incredible pillars of why this is important. First of all, it's exhausting to play the role of someone else every single day of your life, and to hide the true you, and to be prejudging yourself, like I said, worrying about what other people will think if you share this thing about you. And then second, the floodgates it'll open for the business, in terms of other people will do the same, and then you'll have the psychological safety in the meeting for everyone to go, you know what, I don't agree with this, or, oh, this is a great idea. What about this? The
Yeah.
unlocking of the co-creation from that moment on. Really amazing,
Yeah.
Tony. Now,
Yeah.
this is easy for us to say. We're sitting on a podcast. People are going to be listening to this. They're going to be on the tram on the way to work, or whatever they do to listen to this podcast. And they're going to be excited and go, yeah, I think this Tony is onto something, but I don't know how to start.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do they start, Tony?
Well, the first thing is take a piece of paper, a journal, or some way of just, putting pen to paper and sharing your thoughts about, who am I? What are the things that have made me who I am? And that's where the introspection part comes to mind. We are often scared to do that. So start with yourself. Sit down and just get to know what makes me who I am, and not just your title. What are the stories that have made me who I am? If it's easier for you, because oftentimes people see, their values as something that is, usually something that's easy to access or come to. What are the things that you value? Start with your values. So if you say, I value, and I'll share some examples. So let's just say you value adventure. Okay. And adventure is the word that comes to mind. It's one of my values. How do you define it? What does it look like? And where did it originate? What is the origin story of your value of adventure? And so that is the starting point. And you can start to say, oh yeah, that came to me when I was younger. I used to always love watching Indiana Jones movies. And I wished I was him. I wish I was like, running from boulders, like, being chased by evil henchmen or what have you. But it was always about the adventure and seeing what was around the corner. And then as I got older, I realized I really enjoyed going out on adventures during the day with my friends. We'd take our bikes, we'd go for days, just figuring out what we could find as we went into the woods and all different places. And that stuck with me. And then as I got a little older, I would take adventures all around the world. I would travel to places like Europe and all around the US. And those are the things that I really always found that I learned the most. So adventure is something that is meaningful to me. So I digress, but you get the point.
All right. So starting with really introspection and thinking about what is it that sparks me and where did it come from? What's the next
Yes.
step? What's the next step?
Once you start to get that, those things going, then what happens is you start to say, what are some things that I usually run away from sharing? Maybe some of the moments that you've been embarrassed by or that you have felt challenged by. Have you had any trauma in your past that you felt like, I didn't want to go back to that, but, I'll just use an example of, being laid off from a job. And it's very embarrassing and usually it's like a challenge to identity. So you think about those moments and you say to yourself, yeah, I think back to that and I say, I'm glad I did that. I'm glad that happened because I learned so much from it. And what I learned from it allowed me to become who I am now. And it wouldn't have, if it didn't happen to me, then I couldn't have shifted into this new world that I'm in now. And so again, it's that sense of like looking back at the bad things or the things that happened to you and seeing how they opened up new doors, new opportunities, new ways for you to think about the world. Could have been that, your parents divorced and it caused a lot of turmoil in your family. But at the end of the day, you also became closer to your siblings, or you realize how fragile life is and you start looking at things differently.
What I'm loving about this one, Tony, so the sharing of, let's say, the darker side of our souls, the part that we might be hiding because we, like I said, have prejudged ourselves or we're worried about judgment from others. To me, that might be the key to relatability, because we're all human beings and human beings are flawed. Let's face it, we're flawed. Everyone has something. Now, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you think you're perfect, you're not. When someone walks around the office pretending to be perfect all day, that's not very relatable. And then I start myself, if I'm the third party on this occasion, I'll start forming views. I won't necessarily share things and I'll start forming views. The boss will never understand this. So the one that you used, laid off, if there's people in the office that are walking around worried about this quarter's performance and, we might have to lay a few people off. I wonder if I'm in line. I wonder if I'll have to let any of my team go. If they know that the boss has been there before, they might be ready to have that conversation.
Yeah.
But if they think the boss is cold, is perfect, and is a robot, they're not going to have that conversation. So sharing something like that, all of a sudden, you're a relatable human being to me. You're not just the boss.
Yeah. Yes. It's exactly, that's what we're looking for, is to become relatable and approachable in that regard. And that's what really changes the game. When people often say leadership is lonely, and it can be lonely, but part of the reason why it's lonely is because sometimes we do it to ourselves, because we put up a lot of guards and fences. But why? Why do we do that? We don't have to be that way. Even if it means you are connecting with people outside of the doors that you have, that you can feel as though I relate better with another CEO or another person at the same level. That's great, but make sure you're doing that in a way that is really authentic, not like keeping up the guard and saying like, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm just, we're doing great." And then the next day you're kind of going bankrupt and your marriage is falling apart and everything's, going to crap. You have to be able to share for real who you are.
I'm going to go on a small tangent for a second, Tony. The thing I'm wondering about here is whether the age of social media is also making this worse, right? So, and I'm not going to pick on Instagram, but it's the obvious one, right? So people start comparing their own life to someone else's curated version of their life on Instagram. So now I'm going to be less likely to share the dramas I had on the weekend with the kids because I saw everyone else's Instagram feed with their kids are beautiful and they had a beautiful day at the park and aren't they perfect?
Yeah.
No one's family is perfect, but on Instagram it looks damn perfect. People having beautiful curated lives makes it more difficult for me to say, yeah, actually, you know what? School drop off this morning. Oh my God, it was a nightmare. Makes it hard because I'm worried that people are going to judge me because their life is perfect. I saw it on Instagram. How does that sit with you?
You're right. I mean, I think that is absolutely related to this idea that like we need to let down all of those guards around. Well, first of all, knowing that nothing is quite as it seems on the internet, or anywhere else for that matter. People walk around with these senses of like superiority and like, hey, look at me, I'm perfect. The reality is everyone's going through some stuff, but some people hide it much better than others, and some even go the other direction and kind of overdo it and brag and show all these like really amazing things that are just glossing over the fact that on the inside they're dying. And I think that's unfortunate because what happens is they think that that's going to make them popular or people like them. I think in the deep, in other people's minds, it actually might have them either do one of two things. It'll either have them resent them or it will have them resent themselves. And then we'll have them work even harder to try and be like them, which we don't want that. We need to stop that culture of people feeling that they have to compete to be that perfect person. So we could just be more real with each other. Then what happens is we can start to be able to show up and do what's in our heart, what we want to create in the world, do it at the pace that we feel is natural, not try to overdo it. And I think things would be a lot better. So that we just solved the answers to all of the world's problems right there. But
just in one go.
I think, of course, it's not easy.
No, it's not easy. But come back to we spoke before about comfort zone. If we don't step out of that comfort zone, we won't realize the gift that is on the other side of sharing our authentic self. Yeah, really powerful. So if someone does have that limiting belief, they're still sitting here, Tony, and they're listening to us and they go, yeah, I want to do this, but something's still holding them back. So they know what to do now. We've shared why, we've shared how.
Yeah.
But they've got to walk into that office and they've got to take that first step. How do they get past what's holding them back?
Well, first and foremost, they have to get clear in their mind of like, what is it that is the worst that's going to happen? I mean, I know they've heard that before, but what is the worst that could happen? Nothing that you do, I shouldn't say nothing, but most things that you would do are not going to be fatal. They are reversible. I'm just going to give you an example. So let's just say you decide that, I want to try a different career path. And so I feel like I'd like to experiment with doing something different. And I'm not talking about leaving your job to go, become an entrepreneur because, this is challenging, but, just saying about a career pivot. You could do that. And, hey, if it turns out you don't really love that, it doesn't mean that you can't go back. People think they can't. People think that's a waste of time. But instead, what it shows is that you're willing to experiment, that you're willing to take risks, and that you're willing to also own it when things don't work out. And so I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from trying things and them not working out. That's the entrepreneurial mindset right there, is that people start businesses all the time, they fail, and then you brush yourself off and figure out, hey, what's next? So I think that is a real part of this, is to say, what's the worst that could happen? I might have to start again. Well, that's not too bad. You're not starting again from scratch. You're starting again with new knowledge and from a place of still having a ton of experience behind your belt.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, really interesting, Tony. So there's a few things playing in my mind. First of all, that fear, the fear of loss. And unfortunately, our brain has it fears loss much more than it appreciates gain, right? So if you
Yes.
play out the scenario in your head, you may catastrophize the loss and miss the opportunity for gain. But to ask yourself the challenging questions, what's the worst that could happen? What's the probability that that will happen? Because it's usually a very small probability that that catastrophe that you've told yourself, first of all, it's not that bad. And secondly, the probability of it happening is lower than your brain has told you, because your brain is there to protect you. It's there to keep you safe and all these kind of things. So that's why we fear loss so much more than we appreciate gain. So is it real? The story that the catastrophe you told yourself in the head, is it really going to happen? And what's the probability? And is it really that bad if it does happen? And then I'm not going to say reversible, because it's not necessarily reversible. You can't change the past. Once it's done, it's done. But then once you're through that first hurdle, you've got new options.
Exactly.
You got new options. It's not the end of the world. You just, like you said, start over or turn left instead of right. Keep going.
Exactly. And the one thing I'll just point out, and it's really connected to what we just talked about, is this idea of attachment to identity, which also has a challenge. That's what challenges people to move out of their comfort zone. Who will I be if I'm not who I am now? And the beauty of all this is that, guess what? You can have multiple identities throughout your life. Like, one of the things that I've come to realize, and especially when I've had these amazing people on my podcast that I've interviewed, is that, like, you have an identity that you attach to, that sometimes we throw it away and then it comes back. I'm an artist. I've been an artist since I was a kid, and I still am. Even if I don't paint tomorrow, I'm still an artist. If you're a dancer and someone who's danced all their lives and you lose your legs, you're still a dancer, because in your mind what it means to dance. And so when identity is something that you're so attached to, like, I'm a finance professional or I am a lawyer, and then all of a sudden you say, well, what happens if I'm no longer a lawyer? Well, you're always going to be a lawyer at heart, because that's something it's been part of your identity up to this point. But you have an opportunity to create to attach yourself to another identity as well. And you can always come back to the lawyer. It doesn't go away. It's like riding a bike. It's knowledge.
Yeah, I like it.
Gained, go back to.
And it can't be taken away from you. I really like that. And the other thing that's coming to my mind is so many times we ask the question, what if? And we ask the what if question in a negative context. What about the what if in a positive context? So, what if it doesn't? What if it doesn't work? Well, what if it does work? What if it does work? Imagine the world then, and it can be additive. It doesn't have to be subtractive. I love this, Tony. This has been an amazing conversation. So, deep connection comes from being relatable, being open, being vulnerable, sharing the real self, the authenticity. It needs to start with something. So we now know why it's important. It's important for the person because it's exhausting not to be. It's important for those around them, including businesses, because it unlocks this diversity, this openness, the safety for people to share ideas and co-create a new world. Absolutely love it. I love your 3 C's. So connection, curiosity, compassion starts with yourself, including stop prejudging yourself before you share something intimate about yourself. I'll use that word. Stop prejudging yourself and have a bit of self-compassion before you do it. Then once you're ready to share yourself, you're then going to open up the license for others to share their real self with you, and you start again. Connection, curiosity, and compassion for the other person. This has been really powerful stuff, Tony. Thank you so much for sharing these lessons with us today. I'd like to now take us to our rapid round, which are the last 4 questions that we ask all of our guests. What's the one thing you know today, Tony Martinetti, that you wish you knew when you were 20?
I don't have to have all the answers, that it's okay to play and continue to explore. And it'll be a long and exciting adventure if I keep on exploring.
Very powerful. I love it. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book, I always share the same one, but I'm going to change it up because I'm going to share two real quick. My very favorite book is The Art of Possibility by Benjamin Zander and Rosamund Pike Zander. And it's a fantastic book because they explore this idea of like, even in the darkest of moments, you can find possibilities and create these fantastic options for yourself, creating obstacles, turning obstacles into opportunities. And just love his style. I've actually met him in person. He's a wonderful person. But the book I really wanted to get into is the one that is more present day. Think Again from Adam Grant. Adam Grant is like the person who like I wish I could be right now because he's just his thoughts are always so interesting. But Think Again was such a brilliant book because I think a lot of us get so stuck in our thinking. And, oftentimes where our stuckness is because we want to be right. We want to have all the answers. But the reality is keeping an open mind is the most powerful thing we can do.
Oh, that's so challenging, Tony, because we want to be right. So to keep an open mind, sometimes we have to realize maybe we're wrong and we invite new information into our brains. Yeah, very good. Love it. What's your favorite quote?
Let me share one thing about the connection between the two books. One of the things that Benjamin Zander says is that whenever someone screws up because he's the head of an orchestra, he says, how fantastic, when someone screws up because it's an opportunity to learn. And I think that actually is interesting because when you think of Adam Grant's book, it's like, how fantastic. I've been wrong. We get a chance to learn again.
Nice. Absolutely. Love it. All right. What's your favorite quote?
My favorite quote is Marcel Proust. It's the classic quote. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes.
Oh, yeah. Powerful. Yeah, I really love it. All right. And finally, Tony, there's going to be people that have listened to this and they do want to develop these deep connections. They've completely been enthralled by our conversation today and they want to get into it. How do people find you if they'd like to know more?
Well, the best place is to go to my website, which is ipurposepartners.com. And when you go there, you can find my books, my podcasts, and a whole bunch of other fun stuff. And the other place would be LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, always sharing cool stuff. So come check me out.
Brilliant, Tony. And we'll share those links in the show notes as well, make it easy for people to find it. Thank you so much for sharing your gift today, sharing the gift of the authentic Tony, sharing the gift of your time, and sharing the gift of your wisdom and experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to The Leadership Project. In the next episode, I'm joined by Graham Wilson, the founder of Success Factory. We explore how traditional management styles are falling short and leaving us overmanaged and underled. Don't forget to subscribe to the Leadership Project YouTube channel, where we bring you weekly live streams, curated videos, and video podcasts to help you unlock your full potential as a leader and high performer. Thank you for listening to The Leadership Project at mixbeers.com. A huge call out to Faris Sadek for his video editing of all of our video content, and to all of the team at TLP. Joanne Goes On, Gerald Calabo, and my amazing wife, Say Spears. I could not do this show without you. Don't forget to subscribe to the Leadership Project YouTube channel, where we bring you interesting videos each and every week. And you can follow us on social, particularly on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Now, in the meantime, please do take care, look out for each other, and join us on this journey as we learn together and lead together.